Hey everybody, in this week's episode, we're going to be getting into the topic of healing. What does it mean to be healed? What is this process? And we're really going to break down a lot of the nuance and kind of flesh out the details behind this very deep subject. So that's coming up next. Stay tuned.
And welcome back, everyone, to yet another installment of the Wizard Factory podcast, where together we explore deeper understanding of the universe and ourselves. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
And before we get into the content, we want to just kind of do some quick housekeeping, some basic, bulletin points. Keep it short and sweet. Obviously, if you're new to the channel, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and consider subscribing. We got weekly videos coming out. Like the video to help it get more traction in the algorithms. To learn more about us, our mission, and all of our products and services, visit our website at thewizardfactory.com. And we're also available on all the podcast platforms, including Spotify and iTunes. So now you can listen to us in your car or, while you're cooking or whatever. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram. We post, memes and little educational posts like about astrology and the runes and things like that. So let's go ahead and get into the content. So this episode here kind of came about, Brian, you'd sent me a message, what about an episode? He's like, I keep seeing these posts, like praying for a healed world. Well, what is that? So would you like to kind of open with that?
Sure. Well, as with all the topics we get onto the show, we have really discovered through observation that nothing is ever just this black and white thing. That there's always a lot of nuance to it. And healing is definitely such a complex and in-depth and very challenging process that there's no way it's just this black and white thing. So, I was thinking to myself, what does it really mean to be healed? And I don't think it's just this, it's not this light switch, where you're just wounded and then all of a sudden you get to the point that you're healed and then you're no longer going to experience any hardship or pain or anything like that. In life, and that's one of the things with the animist and the pagan mindset, we understand that change is always there and that there's good things in life and there's challenging and painful things in life. And, it's this constant process of change and, flux between them. So to me, what it really meant to be, healed would be being able to be in such a state of awareness or balance that you can feel all the different emotions, whether those are very pleasant or very difficult, and that you can really flow through those in a healthy state of being, without having just these very extreme reactions between them, going between these very extreme poles. So having that healthy flow of emotion, and that then giving you the state of being to go through life operating in a way that whenever you encounter challenges, you're able to respond rather than react. So you can look at things in a healthy way, in a balanced way, feel all those different things, but then you're not getting stuck into years of rage or depression or whatever it is that a lot of people, they have happen when they have events happen in their life, and they really just they take that wound, that trauma very seriously, and they hold on to it. That's that stagnation, and we've talked about on the show, with emotions being energy in motion, they need to flow. That's why they're associated with water. They need to be able to flow in order to be healthy. So for me, it's, being healed, in short, is all about being able to stay in that healthy flow and state of being in a relationship with yourself and the world around you.
Yeah. You absolutely nailed that, man.
Thank you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, because really that's what it comes down to, is that your emotional well-being is really so central to your spiritual health. And notice, very important, notice Brian didn't say the ability to not get angry or the ability to not get upset. No, that's not it at all. And like those are healthy emotions that serve a very important purpose, and they're there for a reason. And I love that you said respond rather than react. I've never heard that before, but that is absolutely brilliant.
I can't claim credit for that. I got that from a genius little friend of mine the other day. So.
Okay, I had a feeling, but nonetheless, it's very useful and very clever. It so concisely depicts what we're getting at here about having a healthy relationship with all of the full spectrum of emotions that are there, and knowing how, through experience, right? Again, natural law, get out there and do, try, fail, and then learn and overcome. In this case, how to navigate all of your emotions, including the very difficult, challenging, confusing ones that are, holding the biggest gems of growth and expansion for you. So absolutely love that. And like, by kind of maybe taking the apophatic perspective here in looking at what is healing, first we can look at what is sickness itself. And this is definitely a kind of an idea generally that we've touched on a few times on the show. But, what it is it's a dis-ease. It's a state of disease due to being separated from nature. Again, the open loop systems like we talked about on the Order and Chaos. Wasn't it that one?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
What we're meaning when we say separated from nature is you're separated from those open loop systems that have an interplay between all things and how, like by destroying something, you're creating space for something new to grow. And so it's sort of that positive and negative, ever shifting, world of forms. But sickness in general is caused by being somehow disconnected from that larger system, ultimately is what that comes down to. So if you're eating food that is synthetic and not in its natural bioavailable form, it's going to create sickness in the body in a plethora of different ways. If you are taking in information that is not truth, you're feeding on a mental diet of crap that is separated from truth, from the open loop system of all things that are and nothing that isn't. That's what truth is. So by being disconnected from truth and that oneness aspect that we've been talking about at any degree is going to, via the laws, create dis-ease. Whether you're talking about metaphysical, mental, emotional, physical, it doesn't matter. It's all corresponding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point to look up. That if you're looking at sickness first, you have to look at or looking at healing first. You have to look at what sickness is. Why are you needing to heal in the first place? And it's because, as you said so well, we've been put into a state of dis-ease or separation from nature, which we've really spoken about a lot on the show,
and from ourselves,
and from ourselves. But I mean, just even as like kind of a quick little note. Just the fact that have you ever been upset or anything, and then you just go take a walk or go spend a little time in nature, and you ever notice you feel better all of a sudden? That right there is just a demonstration of it. There's a hint, there's something there that it's in nature that we really do start to put ourselves at ease, and it's because we can. When you step out of this kind of artificial reality that we've created, this artificial construct, and then you step back into nature, you start, the laws of nature become a lot more observable, even easier. There's not all the buffers around them that we've built up in our modern society, and there's something about that experience. I know when I kind of went on my little hero's journey and just went hiking around and things, that there is something about just stepping away from society and then getting back in nature that allows you to start observing natural law in a way. And then you start getting in alignment with that. So, I mean, that, and, you know, keeping in mind here, the law of correspondence. So if you can do that in the physical and then like see that that even has an effect on your mental state, you're seeing that as within, as so without right there. Right. You know, so that really allows you to see and observe that it is all about getting in alignment with those laws. It is all about like tuning into nature, so you're not fighting against it. Because I mean, think about the insanity of that, of like trying to live in a reality where you're disconnected from nature. Like, I mean, like the planet, you know, no matter where you go on the planet, like you're in it. Like, you know what I mean? So it's something that this is one of the central themes of like why we're pagan, why we're animist. Is because it's through these observation of natural laws that you can start to actually come into first you can become aware that you're even sick in the first place. Many people don't even know they're walking around in a state of sickness, like we talked about on our episode, you know, normalizing sickness in society. You know, so many people are walking around in a state of dis-ease or disconnect from natural law, and they're not even aware that's what they're doing. So first you have to become aware of that, and then you can observe where that disconnect is. And then that's where the healing process kicks in. That's where we have to start this process of going through and recognizing our different traumas and our wounds and then working through them.
Right. And this is the beauty of that trickster archetype as the teacher. Again, the apophatic teacher. We've just identified that, you know, sickness is caused by that separation. Well, once you've identified that, then you're empowered to say, well, you know, you flip it and invert it. If disconnection is what's causing the sickness, then reconnection is what healing is. Yep. And you know, then you're empowered. Then you have a path to take to steer things back on course for yourself. So like healing is getting reconnected with ultimately yourself. You know, your mind, your heart, your soul, your body, with good food and you know, exercise and sunlight and all these things. Other people, you know, relationships, connections there, that is a huge aspect of living a fulfilled or meaningful life. And of course, reconnecting with the ancestors, which is not just this ethereal cloud floating somewhere. It's you are your ancestors. They're inside of you. They're in your blood. You know, your every single cell in your body. That wisdom is there. That charge is there. And like you were saying, Brian, it's observing, you know, nature, but even that kind of has this slight implication of being separate. Like if you're being the observer, you know, kind of in that Eckhart Tolle way, you're sort of stepping back and separating and seeing things, you know, outside yourself, which is useful in a way, but also there's a way to actually do that while also still being a part of everything. It's part of what you are observing is that nature isn't just this thing to observe. It is you, and you are it. And it's like it's waves in the ocean versus the ocean. It's forest versus the trees. Like we are nature, and like just that awareness creates more of that magic that you can tap into, because you're tapping into what you are, and all of that is what you perceive as beyond you, but isn't actually. So yeah, like it's that reconnection. That's the main aspect of it, but it's also a purification, right? Like if you have sewage spilling into your lake, pouring clean water into the lake will help it a little bit, but you also have to remove the source of pollution as well and purge all of that shit. So healing very much is a very purifying and purging, you know, so it's in with the good, out with the bad, you know, and from the context of like flow and stagnation, you know, it's in with the new, out with the old. You're expelling that stagnant, you know, putrid, you know, physical and metaphysical junk that builds up inside and out, especially when we ourselves are choosing toxic behaviors. But even in today's world, toxification is just an everyday part of life, because we're literally under assault on every level. So we're being poisoned mentally, physically. So just by being a human being living in the world and going out and living your life, you're going to have to accept a certain degree of purification and expelling all of that stuff.
Yeah, I like that you brought up that it's this purification process. If you look at the alchemical process, it's a very much like we talked about in our chaos and order episode. It is a destructive and a creative process. Like you're unbecoming what you're not, and then you're stepping into more of what you are. And like you'll notice this as a person, like when you really start to step onto your soul desire, you start to step into like onto your like real path, like you're really doing what your soul should be doing in order to learn. You'll notice this kind of dynamic at play in your life that it will simultaneously be falling apart, like just getting ripped apart, but also like things will be coming together very much. It's this very like there's destruction happening at the same time. Creation and new opportunities are happening. And that's because like when you're living your life a certain way, mentally, you've already put out in the universe, like, okay, so this is what my day's filled. This is what I'm doing. So in order to open up new space, right, you have to destroy those parts of your life. And as those are being destroyed, those open up more authentic parts, more authentic experiences for you to step more and more onto your soul path. So, you very much see that in this healing process, that it's very destructive, but it's also very, there's a lot of growth that is going on at the same time. It's not just this black and white thing. There's many mixed emotions going on, and that's one of the things we're going to get in here too, is like in the role of emotions and how, even with emotions, they're not just this black and white thing. Like there's, in any situation, it can be like just one situation, but you can have a lot of different emotions about it, and it's okay to have all these different emotions. And I think so many times people will in our society, we try to lock people into a certain feeling of like, well, how do you feel about that? Well, like they don't have to feel just one certain way, like they could have a lot of mixed feelings about a situation. So I think it's important to observe that, like I said, it's always important to get out of black and white thinking and be able to see like the nuance and see the gray areas of life.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into the next little talking point, is that sickness is a gradient. Sickness itself is a gradient, just like lots of things that are thought of in a very like binary 1 and 0 kind of way, like awakening, which we're actually going to be doing an episode on soon as well. It's like an air filter, right? It could be clean, it could be filthy, or it could be anywhere in between. It doesn't have to be just this one or the other. But the process of detox and purification is ongoing, on an emotional and a spiritual level. That's why, we've talked about plant teachers. To me, that's almost kind of just one of those things where you could have a regular sort of regimen of, say, microdosing, or a once in a month or once every few month ritual where you're just kind of like trying to purify, as Bill Hicks said, squeegee your third eye, that sort of thing. But, this is an extremely important point that we want to make in this episode, is that, we're always healing, even the so-called healed. Like it's an ongoing process. There's, perfection is not something that anyone can actually attain, but we should always be striving for. It's kind of one of those universal paradoxes. So, it's just extremely important to remember that you should never think that you've just made it. You should never just kind of call it good. Commit yourself to the process. It is a lifelong, never-ending, ongoing process. The second that you think that you've done enough and you stop trying and you stop being self-aware in that way, you're essentially putting yourself to death spiritually.
Yeah, like I said, it goes back to, what like I said in the beginning, like what healing really, or being healed really means to me, is that it doesn't mean that you're not going to experience challenges, or you're not going to experience some kind of like emotional upheaval that's going to like take you a little while to process it. Like just because you might be in a really great state of mind and everything in life is going good one day, you could lose somebody the next day, or, something like that then creates an upheaval in your life that's a trauma, that's a wound that you're going to have to work through. You're going to have to heal through. So it's not this ever like a state that you're just always healed. It's rather that you get into a state of being that, like you said, you can deal with those things that come up in life in a healthy way, that you can feel all the different emotions fully, and that you can flow through them, and feel each one of them equally and fully, and acknowledge all of them, but not get stagnant or stuck in any. And when you can learn to stay in that kind of flow with what is and that's what you're doing. When you have that ability, you're staying in a flow with what's going on in life. When someone doesn't have the ability to heal what they do, what are they doing? They're holding on to the past. And then they're continually reliving that trauma over and over and over again. Whereas if you get into a state of flow where you can deal with things as they come up, then you're staying in the present, and as we've talked about, like in regards to like the web of weird, which maybe we'll do another episode on here soon or something. It's all about staying in verdandi. It's all about staying in that ever becoming present moment, because that is the place where you not only create the past and the foundation that you want to build off of, but the future that you're going to experience. But if you're stuck in the future, or you're stuck in the past, you're not creating in the present. And being healed means that you have brought yourself into the present moment, and you have the ability to stay there.
Right. And what is the biggest cause of mental? Let's just look at it this way. What is the most common states of mental dis-ease? Depression and anxiety. Depression is usually caused from someone either not pursuing their soul path in the present, or just so wounded and traumatized by something that occurred in the past that it's robbing them of their joy in the now. And anxiety is an obsession with the future and what has not even happened yet. It's like mourning chaos that hasn't even occurred yet, is how you can word that. It's mental illness. It's literally miscalibrated emotional responses to beliefs that are not true. That's what it boils down to. And so to riff on what you were saying, it's like that adage that healing isn't linear. I've heard this a lot, and I actually do really agree with that. It's going to have ups and downs. You might feel great one day. You might have a situation that really challenges you and makes you feel like it set you back a long way. But just remember this, that every emotion, both positive and negative, both pleasant and unpleasant, however you want to look at that, are teachers. And they're trying to tell you something. When you're feeling something, that is your soul trying to tell you something. It's up to you and you to use your brain, your head, to figure out what it's trying to tell you. You're then using logic and reason to deduce by looking as accurately as you can at the entire situation, expanding your consciousness as far as it can go to be aware of every possible variable and dynamic. Again, this is the nature of the study of natural law, learning the variables and what this means, that means, and trying to make the best idea for what the outcome might be.
Right. Yeah, I like that you said that it's not linear, because it's, like I said, it really is like a day-to-day thing. Like even just, like just yesterday, Logan, like, like I was really pissed yesterday, like, and like for good reason, like I had a reason, like, and, I was definitely like fuming a lot, and I felt that, and I kind of like sat with it. And then, this morning, something happened again that was like probably even worse than yesterday, but I just, the way I dealt with it, it's just like, okay, like I've already kind of like mentally accepted this situation. I'm already going to just have to do what I have to do and things like that. So like I said, as we're talking about this, like keep in mind, like this is a very active process that like we're both going through all the time. Like we both experience challenges in our life and things, so, even just a few hours ago, I was going through a situation like that like had me extremely upset, and for good reason. But I can feel that out. And then I can also like move into a state of, oh, now I'm like moving into a place of creation now. Like I'm talking about something that I enjoy, talking about like, this, and then, the mood changes. So it's that ability, like it's okay to feel things. it's, you don't stay stuck there. The key is to be able to flow through them,
Well, and if I might add to what you're saying too, I believe that your ability to do that right now is a lot to do with the fact that you are actively taking action to make your situation better. You were having a harder time navigating those difficult emotions when you were feeling more stuck. But now you've taken actions that are kind of working towards, getting a more liberated state of existence. And now you're kind of able to use that as a mental shield, because you can see where things are going. You've changed,
right.
And that's really so absolutely crucial, is realizing that until you change your actions, your situation is never going to change. So if you're unhappy because of your circumstances, but you're not doing anything different day after day after day, then you're going to have to either accept the situation as it is, or do something different to create a different reality. It's up to you. You have to own the spindle.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely dead on, because it's, like I said, even with my situation, without getting into too much detail or anything, it's something we'll talk about on the show in future episodes. But it was definitely something that I allowed to happen, and I was trying to be reasonable, and sometimes, like, there's certain people that doesn't work with, and like sometimes you do, even though the situation is very difficult or it's a very hard choice or things like that, sometimes you just have to do whatever you can to get your life back, and be able to continue to move forward, like with that healing process, other than continue to stay stuck in something that's not healthy, or is only going to continue to inflict more things that you have to constantly deal with, like on a daily basis. So, definitely this is
right.
When Logan and I are speaking about these things, keep in mind, like on the show, when we speak about a lot of these subjects, these are things that, like, we're talking about in our personal lives, and that we're learning, and like, these are lessons. Like this show, like it really is just us sharing ourselves and our journey, and we're just kind of like letting you guys tune in for the ride. So, we hope you're enjoying. And if you are, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whether our ideas were things that we discovered on our own or we learned from other teachers, it doesn't matter, because we only promote ideas on this show that we have personally seen evidence for, that we have observed ourselves and experienced the validity of them. Otherwise, we're not just talking out of our asses here. And if you have an experience that can contrast with ours, that's fine. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're both half wrong, or half right, whatever. Like, that's fine. And we encourage anyone who disagrees or has an alternative perspective, just, comment below and let's have a conversation about it. We always want to grow and expand our perspectives as well, So, the next little thing that I wanted to add in here is the importance of truth for healing. Because truth really is kind of the highest virtue of all. Like, it's kind of the thing that gives meaning to everything else, really, because if something isn't based in truth, tell me what value it has. I challenge you to tell me some value that something untrue has on a long enough timeline. I'm not talking about this short-term little after effect of somebody's feelings got hurt. I'm talking about how it all works out in the end, kind of thing, right? And so in the context of healing, and again, healing is why, the need for healing is why we're seeking truth to begin with, because we've become separated from it. We're sick because we're separated from truth. But here's the thing. Truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. Why would someone hate the truth? Because they don't want to heal, because healing is painful. It's terrifying that you have to face yourself. This is why, at large, the world is in the state that it is. It's mental insanity, because people are rejecting that which is objectively good for them. They have all this healing, all this knowledge at their fingertips, and they're rejecting it because they want to stay in that state of, domestication, mind control. It's Stockholm syndrome. It doesn't, it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. That's why it's mental illness. That's what we're saying.
Right.
You need healing, because you're mentally ill. And so the thing with this is it's a nuanced dynamic, because you need the truth to heal, but you can only take it in certain doses, because your ability to accept truth when you hear it is proportionate to how much healing you've done. The more wounded the person, the more they're going to reject truth. Yeah. So you have to take in a little capsule, a little tablet of truth, and then digest it and process it and take it in and integrate it into your worldview, so that instead of the fears, instead of the projection, instead of the pain, you're seeing things more clearly for what they really are. So you have to, it's like you need your left leg and your right leg to walk. Take in a little truth, integrate it, and heal, right? Because you need truth to heal, but you also need healing to accept truth. So it has to be this sort of oscillating process of taking in, and digesting.
Well, yeah, you're receiving and then you're taking action. It's the feminine and the masculine, like that playback. I love that you kind of like mentioned, like think about like in like microdosing truth. That's kind of a funny way to think about it, because even with a lot of the things, like we've spoken about the concepts, of complicated simplicity, and that like everything is the same in a different way. Those were things that when they hit me like really hard. Like they really did drastically alter my reality very quickly. But at the same time, they also took years and years to really fully integrate, and it's still, it's a continual process. Like I'm always gaining new insights and more depth and more understanding into how these concepts apply to literally everything out there.
Right.
So, it is this, it's good that you say that, like, it is this process of just taking in a little bit and then integrating it, and then taking action on that, and then taking in a little bit, integrating it, and taking action. And it's like a walk is a very good way to think of it. Like that's a very good metaphor.
Because you're walking the path of your own awakening. And I mean, like I can, just like we were saying, this is coming from personal experience on my own journey. If someone had to try to tell me about anarchy back in, 2008, when I took my first red pill, I would have rejected it utterly, because I was literally in the Air Force at that time, but I was hit with this major dose of truth that I was able to accept at that time. It fucked me up. It made me kind of depressed for a while, but I couldn't deny it. I had to accept it because my soul knew that it was true. But that was the first thing that had to happen. First, I had to accept that, okay, maybe the whole narrative of America, fuck yeah, is it so true? And that, they don't have our best interest in mind. They're not here to help, all the stuff. But the whole process between that time, way back in 2008, when I first accepted, okay, people in power do some really nasty things, I should be aware of that, to learning about the occult and how that's been so perverted and made to be dark, but not necessarily inherently dark, and that there is a light side. And then all of that, coming into culmination and understanding spiritual sovereignty well beyond, the political version of my rights, but yeah, just, like I said, just looking at the progression of those steps had to happen in that order for me to actually come to a place where I could hear the principles of true, freedom, and actually accept them as true. And which was still a process that took years, like you were saying, for me to fully integrate. When I first started watching, Larkin Rose videos and Adam Kokesh videos, it still took me a few years of really having a lot of conversations and, taking more information in and stuff to fully have a really good grasp on it.
Right. That's, this doesn't necessarily specifically on topic, but it's very interesting that you mentioned like 2008 was the year that you kind of, because that was like the year that like I was, like I was in the Marine Corps, and that was like the same year that I was like in the process of getting out. So that was like very much a tumultuous year for me, where my whole kind of worldview or reality was like literally being destroyed, and all these like wounds and like all like the bullshit in my life that I had ignored was like literally coming up to the surface. And it was like, is in 2008, like, like mid to late 2008. So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that timeline. I need to go back and look at the charts or something, but anyway, in regards to, aligning with, truth as a way of being healed, for me, it was like thinking about like, even in regards to like looking at your trauma, like you have to actually, you have to look at it through a true perspective. Okay. So like what actually happened? Like, oh, so this happened. I need to acknowledge it, or I need to deal this, or, oh, I went through this situation. This is how I was feeling about it. You have to look at the truth of the situation, like what you're going through, in order to actually accept it. Because if you say you're struggling with addiction or something, but you're still in a state of denial, you're not going to be able to heal, because you're not first seeking that truth out. You have to accept that truth first in order to like continue to make that move forward. So I'm glad that you brought that point up. That's kind of what that brought up for me.
Absolutely. And you also have to care for the truth itself, and that's the thing, is like oftentimes it's the suffering that we endure of our own doing that forces us to care about the truth, because we've learned why the truth fucking matters, why we should love the truth, why we should revere it, and always be striving to connect more with it,
Yeah.
So, of course, beyond just the mental understanding, the intellectual understanding of what is healing, what is sickness, it's an action. Healing is an action. It's a process. So we wanted to get into definitely a little bit more in depth here, some of the many healing modalities that are there. And really, I mean, that's the first point, is that there are so many. There's literally no excuse for not healing, because there are so many ways to do it. And, really any of these things on their own probably won't be enough to just fix a person. That's why I said what I said before about, you have to really be willing to commit your life fully to the process of healing. And then you're going to be doing really multiple practices. Diet, nutrition, that's an easy one, because you got to eat anyways. Might as well just change what you eat and eat more healthy. But like you can do yoga, meditation, chanting, mantra, rune galder, qigong, like energy work and things like that. There, like I said, there's really just no excuse for not doing something, and starting with something small and just implementing that habit in your life, and because that is going to stimulate you in a different way. You're going to experience the joy of that little bit of growth, that if you take a small challenge that you can overcome, you're setting yourself up for success. That's going to build your confidence. This is how healing has to start. You have to take those little steps and build that momentum. But as you do, that charge grows, and the joy, that wunjo, will grow with it. I mean, think about how many times have you been like, I don't want to go to the gym. I feel like crap, blah, blah, blah. And you just go, but you still end up going. And then 5 minutes into your workout, your blood's going, your music's playing, and you're like, damn, I feel really great. I'm glad I came. Sometimes motion creates emotion. It generates it from within. So taking that sustained action, that consistent action in alignment with your higher, purpose, is going to make you feel good. And then that becomes addictive. That becomes more addictive than the destructive behaviors.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I was thinking about healing in regards to like the law of correspondence here, and how we all, because obviously with understanding the principle of mentalism, that it's our inner world that we then project out onto our reality field that, gets reflected back onto us. So it's this projection and reflection at play. Well, if you were coming from a place of having that inner wound, or your worldview is based off of a wounded worldview, of course, that's what you're going to project onto the rest of the world. Why do you think we have so many people that are demanding for a government, or they want to stay in control because they don't believe they can trust other human beings? Mm-hmm. They've projected their own wounded worldview out onto everybody else, mm-hmm. And then the result of that gets reflected back. They want that control. They get the control back, mm-hmm. So when you can step into a place of a healed worldview, a healthy worldview, all of a sudden the world doesn't become so dark and gloomy. It becomes a place with many synchronicities and a lot of beauty. And even though there's difficult things, like you see it from a holistic perspective, that you're not just thinking of, oh, life is so shitty, or, like there's a lot of people that have that worldview, and it's because they haven't done that healing. There's a lot of trauma there that they're holding on to, a lot of stagnation. They've mm-hmm. lost the disconnect with the present moment and that ability to flow in a healthy way. So, healing is not only important for you as an individual for improving your life, but for like society as a whole. Like it really does come down to each and every individual being able to like do their own work, and come into a state of emotional stability, like where you are in a healthy place of awareness, that you can feel all the emotions, all the experiences of being human, but in a healthy way. And you don't have, like, you can start, coming from a place of acting in response rather than reaction, like I mentioned earlier. Right. Yeah. This was just kind of hitting me. It's interesting to think that some crime of passion, so to speak, mm-hmm. you could really say that it wasn't, say, the anger that made this person act out violently. It was their lack of control. Because just because you feel anger doesn't mean you're going to be a violent person. That's what we're getting at here, is when you're healed, when you're a person who's relatively done a lot of healing, you're just better able at practicing self-control, even when your emotions are making you want to kind of act impulsively and brash, mm-hmm. It is holding yourself back. So yeah, balance of order and chaos. Exactly. Yes, and the whole no rulers kind of thing. Well, that should be caveated as no external rulers, because the only way that anarchy could ever actually function is self-ownership, self-rulership, self-control, not doing bad things just because we get mad at someone, stuff like that. Right. And yeah, absolutely. Like the external world is 100% a reflection of our internal state as a collective. So if we, the human species, collectively believe that we can't be trusted with freedom, that we deserve to be slaves, that we are rightfully slaves, which is literally what the African American slaves in the South, a couple hundred years ago, were brainwashed to believe. They literally were trained to believe that they ought to be slaves, that is their place in life. That is an unhealthy, sick mindset that needs mm-hmm. to be healed. And that's going on to some degree in the people at large, hence why we have government, hence why we demand that we need a ruling class. Mm-hmm. So that's why the internal work needs to be priority number one, above all that other stuff about protesting and, waking people up and doing the great work and all that stuff. Like the great work starts here. And if you're not doing this, you're really not, regardless of what you're doing out there. Because if you're not doing the internal work, then all the work that you're putting out is probably doing more harm than good, because that too is simply just another projection, another reflection of your internal state. And if you ain't working on healing actively, you it's a guarantee that you're in need of it, because like we said, it's ongoing. It should always be happening.
So
Right.
yeah, I figured we could just kind of expand on each of these little healing modalities as we were going through them. So for example, like
Oh yeah,
meditation.
sure.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I'll start, like, for example, meditation is so useful, even though it's so simple. It's, when you try to describe it, it's like, well, it's not even really doing something so much as it's not doing something, like it's one of those things that people get a lot of, like, really weird ideas about what it is or how to do it or whatever.
Mhm.
But really what it is it's like practicing to balance on one leg on a rock or something. Like, it, you don't, you're not fighting thoughts from coming into your head. You're just not feeding them or attaching to them or running away with them when they come through.
Mhm.
So that's the balance point. Remember, meditation literally means the point of balance. Meditate, to come to the
Mhm.
center.
Mhm.
And so when you fall off, you don't get mad, you don't get frustrated, you just get back up there again. So
Right.
that's what it is. You're not attached to anything. You're allowing that flow of just focus. You're focused on one thing to do, and then just working in that space of simplicity. Because remember, the it's like the less there is, the more there is. That kind of like creation and destruction,
Mhm.
flip, two sides of the same coin kind of thing. It's creating that space mentally for everything else to come through. And that's, you should be like listening to those things that are coming up, because oftentimes
Mhm.
our brain is trying to distract ourselves from the real issues going on beneath the surface. So it tries to keep itself busy with little, oh, I need to make a laundry list, or, like, I need to call such and such back, or whatever, just that little busy talk, because really
Mhm.
there's something emotional is going on a deeper layer. So anyway,
Right.
meditation is just really something useful to kind of work with that.
Well, and even with meditation, there's many forms of it. Like you said, a lot of people kind of they have funny ideas about what it is, and they'll think it's kind of just sitting there quietly and having your mind perfectly still, and that's not the case. Like you said,
Mhm.
it's just not being attached to things. It's allowing
It's
things to flow and come
self-observation as
through.
well.
Yeah, you're still observing, and it doesn't even have to be sitting there. Like, you could go for a bike ride or for a walk or play some
Mm.
music. Those are all wonderful forms of meditation. Like,
Mm.
it depends on what it is for you. Like in astrology, you can see based on like where your moon is. That's a really good way to figure out like what kind of meditation will work for you. So for example, like a person with like their moon in Aries, like they might want to get active. They might want to go work out or go for a walk.
Mhm.
Like a person with the moon in Pisces, they might want to go swimming or go kayaking. You know what I mean? Like, you can see these like different little things that you can do, and one thing might work really well for another person and might not work so
Mhm.
well for another person. Like, it's just like with the pagan and the spiritual path. Like, the healing is a individualistic path. It's what works for you. Like,
Mhm.
what works really well for someone else might not work for you, and that's perfectly fine. Like,
Mhm.
but there's so many things that there's no excuse to not be doing the work. Um, there's also things like getting into like ritual or like qigong. Doing things like the whole breath or rune galder. Which, if you don't know how to do those, or you would like some meditative practices, go to thewizardfactory.com. Right on the very top, there's a free initiation package. All you got to do is enter your email, and that will give you a link that has 3 different videos on there on how to start ritual and practice, and what are some of these things that Logan and I use in our own personal practice that we have found very helpful. You know, there's EFT, an emotional freedom technique. There's so
Mhm.
many different like little techniques you can try and do that, you don't just have to hone in on one.
Absolutely. I love that
Right.
you said meditation doesn't have to be just sitting there. That's so true. In fact, one of the things I love about yoga is that it's one activity that you can do that is very holistic. There is a very meditative aspect to it, especially with the way that you have to control and time your breathing, and that gives your brain kind of that simple focal point that is a meditation technique to give you something to focus on that kind of clears the space off of everything else. But then there's, a very physically challenging aspect to it also, uh, and the mobility, flexibility aspect to it. So I love yoga because it's such a good use of your time. You're getting so many benefits for just that one activity. Let's see. Of course, and then these are things you can do yourself, but then there's other services that you could seek out, massage therapy and chiropractic. A lot of people don't realize how much chiropractic is really one of those. It's as essential as like brushing your teeth or something. Like I really think that it should be a regular part of everyone's lives. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to afford that kind of thing, but it can really help, as in massage too, really help move and release a lot of that stagnant energy that gets trapped in your joints and your muscles and tendons and ligaments. And it's crazy like how attached the body is as one system. Like I'll be rubbing a Susan in the part of her back and she can feel it in her neck, and then she'll like pop her neck and she'll be like, oh, like getting physical work done is very important with healing, because trauma becomes trapped in the body. So that's where you have to address it at that level, and then work up from there, from the physical to the metaphysical. Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on. Acupuncture, Reiki, binaural beats and frequencies that help modify your brainwave patterns and stuff like that. Like you said, EFT, NLP, like anchoring, things like that. Even just simple isolation or solitude. Going on a camping trip, or even a short 10-minute walk. It doesn't have to be anything major, but just getting away from the life that you feel is sort of like bearing down on you, and giving yourself the space to really literally hear your own thoughts and feel your own feelings. And like, there can be a lot of medicine in just doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, like Logan said, there's so many. So it's just like a carpenter. You don't want to just have one tool in your tool bag. There's different tools for different things, and they're all useful. But even one of the most useful things I found, like in healing, is just learning how to tap into your feelings and deal with them. Like just even like a simple practice of just like imagining a scenario that would, like, it's a totally imaginary scenario, but you allow yourself to feel it as if it's real. So you can then work with processing that. Like, that's a very, very useful trick, like that I kind of, no one taught me. I just kind of learned it naturally, intuitively, but I've found that has been just a very wonderful thing for whether it's like building compassion, empathy, like figuring out how to deal, like say you're even going through, like there's a real situation in your life you're going through, playing that situation out in your head, allowing those feelings to get stimulated and to come up, and then like processing them. And, kind of dealing with that on your own in private before you go and respond. That's how you step into that place of being able to respond instead of react. That's a very useful practice of just learning to sit and to feel and learn to practice learning to deal with your feelings. Like when they seem out of control, you're like, why would I want to stimulate more? But when you do get to that point, it's a really good practice that you can start doing that. Or there's some people that they're just so cut off from their emotions, like I was, that I actually had to practice feeling for like quite a while in order to like kind of reawaken that side of myself that I had that had been programmed and shut off.
Wow. Yeah, that's really profound points there. That's visualization. And that is an incredibly profound and proven, like scientifically proven technique that is very versatile. There's a ton of things you can do with that. I've read books about how you can imagine what your day is going to be like. That's a good way to start your day, is literally imagine the things that you're excited or not excited. Like, it doesn't matter. Imagine things that you know that you're going to do that day, and imagine it going really well. And the more specific that you are with your details in your mind, the more potent it is. And, we can see that this is the principle of mentalism. You're literally using your psychic energy to help sort of like program your subconscious to perform better. And for me, one of the biggest healing factors that I ever, periods that I went through where I was experiencing the most growth and like new states of emotional health is is by challenging myself, trying new things. I kind of, joined a company and became a truck driver. So it sort of took an adventurous leap of faith and a big drastic lifestyle change. And, I started building kind of an online community of people that I felt really genuinely appreciated me for me. That was a huge aspect of it, because I never felt that when I was growing up. I always felt like an outcast because, most people didn't understand me. I thought differently. Well, I thought, period. And they just thought I was weird. So, and then when I say challenge myself, I also mean, like, if you struggle with boundaries, literally view people like narcissists that don't respect your boundaries, view it like a game, like interact with them. I had people that I was interacting with at that time, and my friends were like, why are you still talking to them? And I'm like, oh, it's cool. I'm just practicing on them. Like, every time they encroach, I would just get better and better at saying no. Like, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And each time it gets less scary and less stigmatized in your mind. And then it just becomes kind of like a natural integrated part of your being. So, like,
right.
Yeah.
That's a great point that you brought up there. Cause what you're hitting on there is like, even in like with trauma bonding is what that brought up for me. Like in relationships, it's like that person, they get afraid to even say something, or they get afraid to even like do anything at all. Cause they never know when that other person is just going to like go total rage for no reason. Like even if you didn't do anything, they just like, they're that mentally unstable that they'll do things like that. So as you start kind of like taking your power back and taking these little steps and saying no, you'll notice that like, it'll get easier and easier for you, even though that initial period is kind of very difficult, because as soon as you start telling someone like that no, or someone that you're trauma bonded to no, they won't like that. They're like, you'll get that narcissist, especially if the person's like a narcissist or they have some kind of mental health issue, they're going to like lash out in rage, but as you get like more, you kind of just get used to dealing. Like you said, you just kind of practice, and every little interaction, although difficult, each one is a practice, and you get a little bit better at it and a little bit better at it. And eventually you can get to the point that you can separate and sever that bond, which is something that can take a long time. But, I like that you brought that up, because that's kind of what it brought up for me.
Right. Yeah. It's very grounding. And each time it's like you're planting your feet a little bit firmer in the ground, because typically people, they kind of get pushed to one side or the other. Typically people who are more empathic, myself, being a very emotional, like a Cancerian type of person, that groundedness is where I would struggle, where it felt like I was just the bother. My feelings were just inconvenient for people, and that, their side or their wishes would kind of just be the default, right? I would feel this unnecessary shame and guilt just even when I thought about being confrontational and speaking my truth, and so that took years really to finally overcome. And not to say, I still get, I still get nervous and things like that, of course, but that's our point, is that I feel that I've reached a new gratifying level of, emotional groundedness there. That doesn't mean that I've perfected it. It's that I feel that I've hit that kind of milestone, and I'm in this, it's this new me kind of feeling that's really, really nice. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it, because it's like, when you first go to, I remember when I was like kind of first like getting interested in these things back, like when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, and like, between like 2008 and like, 2010, those couple years, that's when I first kind of started, discovering like Buddhism and Taoism, and like reading a little, books, and kind of starting to question things a little bit. This is a process that it takes a long time. And like when you first, I remember like reading in a really good book, if people haven't read it, it's called The Seven Taoist Masters. And it takes you on a journey through these seven immortals who, and each of their different ways that they found the Tao, or they found their enlightenment. But in that book, there was something that they kind of mentioned, that like this period of like kind of really getting to that place of where you just kind of get it, where you're at that place of being able to stay in the flow in the present, that it's generally like this 8 to 12 year period. And it's really funny because I have very much noticed and kind of found that in my own path work to be true. And I've noticed it with other teachers, that there's this general period of, like, you could say roughly around a decade of just kind of almost locking yourself away in this kind of study period. Like, where like this is just like what you're digging into is like undoing all the old programs, learning new information. And then you get to a point that you can step into that now, that you know how to integrate things and how to be a healthy human being. And then you can teach that to others. But it's this process. And I remember thinking at the beginning, like, man, 10 years, like that seems like a long time, but looking back now, it's like, man, that really, it's not as long as what it seems once you commit to that process and you just keep going at it. Like, before you know it, like, you're going to be there, but it's a process, and it does take that commitment. It's the Saturnian lessons definitely apply to the subject of healing, that it takes consistent discipline over time, even when things are really difficult. But when you do that, just like with Saturn, even though it pressures you and it tests you, once you gain those lessons, like, you retain them, you have them. Like, and that's the thing with healing. Like, once you've worked through these things, once you understand cosmic law, that's something that you have. You can take it through the rest of your life, but it's a process to undo all the old bullshit, destroy it, get out of the way, and then make room for that new growth, for that person who you're really meant to be.
So beautifully said, man. And that's a great way to wrap this episode up. So that's everything we have for you. If you like the video, hit that like button on your way out. We appreciate you. Thank you for your viewership, and we'll see you next week. But until then, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.